Oh. Flip the camera around. There we go. All right. That needs to be back on. Okay. There we go. Should be better. I just need you to adjust everything for me. Okay, zoom in for me a little bit.
Well,
Right there. Got it? Perfect. All right, sorry about that, everybody, guys. We ran into some problems there trying to get set up with the comments section. Is it showing through now? Everything look good on there? All right, guys, we're going to give it just another minute since we ran into a problem with some comments here. We're just going to give it another minute, and then we'll get started. All right, guys, we're going to give it just another minute since we ran into a problem with some comments here. We're just going to give it another minute. That's echoing at all? Everything look good?
Lee Meyer says it looks good.
Looks good? All right.
I think you're good.
Look good? How many you got?
12.
12? All right. Go ahead and get
14.
started. 14?
Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and get started then. Welcome, everyone, to Friday Night Tie Night with TCO. I'm, for you that do not know me, I'm Alex Kolivras, and I am based out of the Boiling Springs store, just outside of Carlisle, PA. As you know, all 4 of our stores are in Pennsylvania. I've had a little bit of experience working at the Reading store, so if you guys go into the Reading store and haven't seen me in a couple years, I'm now full-time working at the Boiling Springs location out of there. I've been there for about 5 years. I started my first time at TCO, I started at Reading, and then kind of bounced between both stores, and now I'm fully at Boiling Springs now. So tonight, with it being spring still, last week John did an amazing job doing sulfurs. Going into this is sulfur season right now. Tends to be one of my favorite times of the year to be on the water for sulfurs. But right now, Pennsylvania being Pennsylvania, it rains a lot still this time of the year, so this is good streamer weather still. These 2 flies I'm going to tie tonight are staples in my guide box. All year long. 2 of my favorite patterns, one pattern being mine, the next pattern being a pattern that's been out for a little while now. It's nothing new. I've just over the past couple years found a few ways to tweak them, make them a little bit better, and not be quite as big and bulky as the original pattern is. One being the first one is the Goblin, which is a pattern that I created a handful of years ago. Somehow stumbled across it, went out fishing with it, and it worked. Tweaked it a little bit, and it's been a absolute favorite pattern of mine. It's great because it replicates multiple different things, anything from a sculpin to a crayfish, to just some simple bait fish that's in our water system. It might even be a big stonefly nymph, for all I care for that. The fish know. It just got a lot of movement. It has a mix of a little bit of natural material along with a little bit of synthetic. Both these streamers do. That's what makes them so effective, I think. You have a lot of staple patterns that were all natural materials that are just great streamer patterns to create. You also have other streamer patterns that are all synthetics that are absolutely great and super effective. I think when you take an awesome combination of both those materials between natural and synthetic and you blend them together, they create something that absolutely works in the water all the time. For multiple species, honestly, it doesn't matter what species you go after. When you blend those two types of materials together, they just come together and work very well together. We're going to get started with the Goblin. If you've never seen the Goblin before, I'm going to put one in here that's already pre-made for you quick. If you haven't got a chance to see the pictures of it at all, right here. Doesn't look like a whole much. It's kind of scraggly looking when it's dry, not in the water yet. It really comes to life once it gets in the water and gets saturated. It creates a tapered effect to it the whole way from the head down to the tail. But also as it moves through the current system, it just has tons of movement, natural properties to it as far as the movement goes. The UV properties within it through the synthetic material of UV Polar Chenille. UV Polar Chenille has become a staple with a lot of my flies over the years. And if you know any streamer, multiple streamer patterns, a lot of guys that are professional tyers out there use this material on a lot of different flies. I think for streamers, especially, even some spay flies and stuff like that, you start to see that in there now. This material is just absolutely great. You look at this fly, it kind of looks similar to what you would call like George Daniel, his sculpt snack. Very, very similar. I just changed some of the materials that are in it. I did away with rubber legs, did away with the cone. I used one color of marabou, those kinds of things. Slimmed it down a little bit, not as bulky, and when it gets wet, it just cuts through the water faster. The nice thing about this as well, you can you strip it like a streamer, fish it like a streamer in the water. I've also dead drifted this fly multiple times and underneath a bobber and stuff like that for steelhead. Super effective if you tie it into white patterns, silver patterns to imitate those bait fish that come out of the Great Lakes up into the systems. Those emerald shiners and alewives and stuff like that in some of them systems. You can just dead drift it and it's fantastic, just kind of like a white zonker or white death would be. Around here, stripping it early season is absolutely great for aggressive fish, wild fish and stocked fish. Bass season, it's phenomenal. I do really well with it during the warmer months, maybe when the water gets a little bit warmer and a little bit more clear, a little bit more shallow. It works really well then, kind of like a Clouser minnow would. Clouser minnow works great all year long for bass, but I tend to do better with streamers, smaller streamers in the warmer months. And this thing just gives off a lot of shine. This marabou, when it gets wet, it just bounces around in the water a lot, creates a lot of movement. The great thing about this fly too is it is a great pattern for a beginner fly tyer to start with. In reality, it only takes about 3 materials.
Can you move just a smidge? Your body.
This way?
Yeah, so you keep solid color behind it to keep it focused on your fly.
So anyways, back to that. It is great for that. For a beginner fly tyer. You can use any type of streamer hook. You can use any type of streamer hook for this. I like to use a smaller hook in general. I'm using 210 Danville's thread for this. You can use any thread, really, a 6/0, 8/0, anything. I'm going to get started right up behind the eye here and just run a quick thread layer down to the bend of the hook. Stop there. I'm going to clip my tag off quick. Secure that quick. You can change the tail color. You can use gray. Gray is my original color. Shad gray or regular gray. Olive works very well. Anything yellow. I've tied them in so many different colors: black, purple, anything. You're gonna measure your tail length out about the length of the shank of the hook. Butt it right up against the shank of the hook, then on the bend, and you're gonna just give it 1 or 2 pinch wraps to lock it in, just like that. Clip that off. Secure that a little bit. I'm going to go back up to the front here now quick, and I'm just going to tie my eye in. You can use any type of lead eye. You can use lead-free eye if you want as well, dumbbell eye, anything like that. I really took a liking to the double pupil lead eyes that came out a couple years ago. Before, I used to just use a solid white lead eye. Honestly, it didn't make any difference other than probably just brighten the fly up in the water a little bit, maybe gave off a little flash. You know, just secure those eyes in a couple figure-8 wraps. Build up just a little thread body then behind that. I'm going to go to about the middle of the shank of the hook then with my thread. I'm going to take my olive UV brown Polar Chenille. This is the original color. Gives it kind of that sculpin effect, sculpin color, just real baitfish looking color. I'm going to secure that in quick. Tie that back to the bend where my marabou is. And I'm just going to run my thread right up behind the eyes. See that? Generally, I'll take my UV chenille and I'll just kind of fluff it out a little bit here quick. Pull it out. And then I'm just going to start wrapping up to the shank of my hook. Or I'm sorry, up to the eye of my hook. I'm going to stop right behind the lead eyes with it. Each wrap, I kind of wrap right over top of itself, comb it back a little bit. And then once I get up to the front, I'm going to wrap a whole bunch of times over top of itself to build up bulk a little bit right behind those eyes. That's once this material gets wet, gets in the water, and you start fishing it, that's going to give it that taper effect a little bit. In the back there, underneath the marabou, with doing those kind of single wraps back there. Another cool aspect of this fly is it will start to get very translucent once it gets wet, and that's what's really nice about this material is it's super thin, and it does get very translucent in the water. I'm going to snip that off. Okay. And then before, you really don't have to add any dubbing or anything. You don't have to add a thorax or collar to this if you don't want to. Past couple years, I started adding dubbing, sculpin olive dubbing, any type of olive dubbing. I really like Dave Whitlock's SLF dubbing. I use a lot of his stuff, his like watery olives, scud olives, anything like that. We'll fold that back and just tie in a little bit more there, and that gives it that perfect taper right behind the eyes, back down to the end there. And I'm gonna go right in front, wrap a couple times. I'm gonna take my whip finisher. You can do a half hitch, whatever you want to do. I'm gonna whip finish off the end here, and you're done. So it's a super simple, effective fly. Once you learn how to tie these, which is very easy because it is, like I said, basically 3 materials plus your eyes and your hook, you can really pump these things out in no time. After every fly, I'll tie up a dozen or so, and I will put a little super glue over top of the eyes, secure that, and then underneath the eyes, you'll see you have just a little empty, naked space underneath the eyes there. So I generally will run a little bit of super glue under there. Let that dry for a minute, and you're done. So that was a pretty quick little fly. It's a real down and dirty guide style fly because, like I said, you can tie a whole bunch of them in a very short period of time, and they are super, super effective. For somebody that might not be used to streamer fishing, this is a great pattern to begin with because it's lightweight, super effective. If you have a lighter rod, you don't have a streamer rod, say a 6-weight or 7-weight or something like that, this is a great rod, fly to throw on a 5-weight. I originally started throwing it on a 4-weight when I first created it. So it's very, very easy to fish on a...
Any reason for super glue versus UV?
Super glue versus UV. UV, you can use it. It's just as effective. I just like to use that super glue. To me, it penetrates a little bit better, and it's a little bit stronger for on streamer flies. I generally use UV on all of my nymphs and stuff like that. Some of my bigger stone flies and stuff, I use it for sure. If you have UV glues, I would recommend using the thin or the flow. Allow it to penetrate down through that thread a little bit better. So, how big is that golden rainbow on the wall? Wouldn't you like to know there, Bluegill? All right, so that's that fly, the Goblin. Like I said, this has been a staple pattern of mine for quite a few years. Fish this for steelhead, smallmouth bass, farm ponds, trout for sure. One of my top guide patterns for guiding. Recently took it in a little bit of a bigger size down in Florida last year when I got the great opportunity to go do some tarpon fishing. Fishing it right off the beach. I caught some just little dinky fish, saltwater fish with it. I did catch a baby grouper with it, which was absolutely awesome to catch a baby grouper on one of my patterns. That's something, most fly fishermen don't get to do on a fly rod every day. So there's the Goblin. If anybody has any more questions on that fly, I'm going to stick around at the end here for about an extra 5 minutes to answer questions for everybody. That way we're not held up on questions the whole time. The next pattern I'm going to do, if you guys have not got a chance to see that, I'm going to throw it in the vise here quick. This is the Flugen Zombie. This is not my pattern. This is one of my favorite streamer patterns, though. I would say, other than some of Kelly Gallup's patterns, this would probably be next runner-up for one of my favorite patterns to use for streamer fishing, especially for trout and pre-spawn bass. This is a really good little pattern throw for pre-spawn bass. You can see this is one I did here. This I call the shortstop Flugen Zombie. The original Flugen Zombie was about 3.5 to 4, probably about 4 inches long. Maybe I've seen them a little bit longer. The marabou and stuff sticks out a little bit further on it. Does not generally have the rubber legs or anything like that. That's all stuff I added. And if you can see behind the head here, I put deer hair in there. That's a little something I added as well to use a little less dubbing and to help push a little bit more water, especially during heavy water events, stuff like that. I like it to push a little bit more water. Also added some flash out the tail as well, just a little extra flash to it. So essentially, this pattern is pretty simple to tie even for a beginner. It looks kind of scary when you're looking at it. Looks like a fly tier's nightmare, but in reality, it's basically 2 woolly buggers built together. So it's really cool that, getting into articulated types of streamers, some guys can be a little hesitant on tying these flies. They're really not as bad as they seem in reality. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that, guys. For some reason, it just froze up on the phone. Yeah, we're back.
You're good.
Good. All right, guys. Sorry about that. For some reason, it froze up. The phone just froze, locked up on us, so we had to reset it quick. I don't know why that happened. For some reason, technology's fun. So, anyways, we're gonna get started on tying this articulated Flugen Zombie. Like I said, this is not one of my patterns. This is a pre-existing pattern that I kind of just added some extra pieces to. So, let's start with the Gamakatsu hooks. Both the hooks I use for this are Gamakatsu. One being a size 4, the other being a size 1. You can tie this with different size hooks and stuff like that. So get started there. You can stick with the same thread for tying this as I tied my Goblin with, or if you want to change thread, it really doesn't matter. Super effective with just using 210 denier thread. You can tie it. So we'll get started here. I'm gonna get started about 3/4 of the way up and just tie back to the bend of the hook. Clip that off. Then I'll take my marabou. You can use any color marabou. This is a pattern. It does not have to be just one color. This pattern is effective in multiple different colors. I've tied it from yellow and brown to little baby rainbow trout colors. Olive is super effective. Anything olive is super effective. Tans, grays, anything like black, all black, I've done it already. I'm going to use some gray marabou that you just striped with a marker black. Or if you have some MFC marabou, anything like that, they do their barred marabou, but any gray marabou or anything like that, if you want to put stripes on it, you can pin it down and take a Sharpie marker across it, and it'll stripe it up for you. So I'm going to put my first piece of marabou down. As you can see in the Goblin, when I tied that, I only used one piece of marabou for that, for the tail. Here, I like to use a little more heavier tail on this pattern. So next, I'm going to take my flash, a little bit of flash on there, just crystal flash, pearl. If you want to, you can change colors. It really doesn't matter. You can add all kinds of different colors. That's what's great about tying flies, is you can take a pattern and change it with almost any type of color, and it should work most of the time. Have once, a dark day outside, we generally say use dark fly. Bright day, use a bright fly. So have a bunch of different options there for you. And that flash, I have it basically just coming out the back end of that first piece of marabou there. The cool thing about this marabou and stuff, when it gets wet, marabous can be pretty translucent in the lighter colors as well. So you'll see all that pearl crystal flash shine right through there as it's moving through the water. I'm going to take another stack of marabou then. Some fluffy marabou right there. I'm going to stack that up right on top of the first piece. A couple pinch wraps, secure it. Okay, here's that. Okay, now fun part comes in. So here's where it comes into, now that we got our tail done and stuff, this is where it comes into the part of basically building a woolly bugger. So for beginner fly tyers or anybody, woolly bugger is probably one of the first streamer patterns, along with a clouds or minnow, that you should probably learn how to tie. Giving those, it teaches you how to work with materials in a simple manner, just because it's not a whole lot to it, and they're both flies that work absolutely anywhere in the trout game, bass game, or steelhead game, anything like that. So if you learn how to make a woolly bugger, you can basically make this pretty easy as well. Recipe calls for medium schloppen. I like to use medium size schloppen for these, just because they're cut down, the barbels are cut down a little bit smaller on it and stuff. If you don't have medium schloppen available, regular long size schloppen at 5 to 7 inch range will be just as effective, because you can just strip it down to a smaller size yourself. So don't feel like you have to go out and buy special kind of schloppen. Here, when I pick my pieces of schloppen, I pick two different sizes. A larger one here, that is going to be for my front end, so we're not going to worry about that one until we get up to the front. This smaller one right here, this is going to be the one I'm going to use for the back end to get started with. So I'm going to take my schloppen, and I'm going to grab it by the top here. I'm going to pop, get it real webby looking here. If you just take your fingers, you can strip it a little bit here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and strip the right side of the feather. I'm going to strip that down. Just get all that stuff off of there. Strip it down almost to, you'll see there's almost marabou looking material here at the bottom. Pretty much what it is. Get down to that. Maybe leave a little bit of that at the bottom. I'm going to go back up to the top here just to get the vein stripped a little bit for a good tie-in point. Right there. And there we go. I'm going to be left with that then. This is all going to be stuff that's going to go on top of the shank of the hook then for the fly. And I'm going to tie in right there. Take that. I'm going to tie that in quick. Secure that. And then just like the Goblin, where I use that UV Polar Chenille for the body of it. Same thing here. I'm going to use UV Polar Chenille in the copper color for this fly. Again, there's about 20 different colors of UV Polar Chenille out there, so feel free to change colors all the time on these. Do ones in black, yellow. There's basically any type of color feathers out there. You have almost a UV Polar Chenille color to go along with it, which is great. So I'm going to tie that in right on top with it. Okay, and then I'm just going to tie all that back right to the bend there. Right where the feather, where the tail, the marabou feathers on the tail end. Clip off the junk here. All right, now quickly I'm going to wrap back up to the front, right behind the eye there. And I'm just going to leave my bobbin hang. Cool little tool that came out from Loon here. The gator clip tool, kind of right here. Good. From Loon. This has been a pretty cool little tool to use. It comes with a shepherd's hook on it as well, so you can do a dubbing loop and stuff with it. And then you have a gator clip function. Basically just twists off. Then you have a little counterweight down here with your thumb hole right here. So I'm going to take the Schlappen and the UV Polar Chenille, and I'm going to clip it in. Once this is all done, this is going to be kind of like making a dubbing brush almost, except you're using feathers and chenille for it. So I'm going to take that, clip that in with that gator clip, if you can see that. I'm going to take that, and then I'm just going to twist it up a little bit, and I'm going to kind of just marry these two materials together. And they're almost going to look like a dubbing brush when they're done. Okay. Boom. About a dozen twists or so. If you got a comb or a piece of Velcro or anything, any type of little tool, I'm going to kind of just go down through. I'm going to use that comb portion of it. I'm just going to comb this material a little bit and kind of fluff it up a little bit, get it real scraggly looking. And that is going to be the body base of my fly. So now that that's all good, I am going to weave in and around the hook point of this hook, and I'm going to start to wrap overlapping wraps back up the shank of the hook. If you have a rotary vise or anything like that, you definitely can take advantage of your rotary functions. I have a rotary vise, absolutely love it, except I have stuck to the old school mentality of still wrapping stuff. Don't use my rotary function as much as I probably should when it comes to tying streamers, but I've taught myself to just kind of stay away from it. But if you have it, it's a great time to use it. This is a great pattern to use it with. It'll probably save you a few minutes. So once I get right up behind the eye, the hook there, I'm going to just secure that with my thread tied off. Squeeze in here, do a couple securing wraps of thread, and then I can get in there with my scissors and clip that out of there. And that is the first part there. All I'm going to do now is, with the original Flugen Zombie, there's no rubber legs or anything in there. This pattern, I decided to add rubber legs to it, just to give it a little extra movement through the water. I'm going to take two, I got in a recipe calling for gold. You can use any color rubber legs, for that matter. Changing colors all the time with this pattern. I'll take two just regular rubber legs. It doesn't matter whether they're Loco legs from Hairline or just regular rubber legs from Wapsi or anything like that. The gold, I like it, just blends pretty good with this copper tone color to it. I'm going to take two of these, take them up to the middle here quick, and I am going to bring one off the right side, one off the left side, and I'm just going to secure in that rubber legs quick. And you're going to see you're going to have a pretty big little nub right there once you secure those rubber legs. Take your whip finishing tool, and I'm just going to whip finish, or you can do a half hitch on there. Doesn't really matter. Boom, secure that. And now you're going to cut your thread off. So your back half's done. You're just going to shore up your rubber legs here quick. I have them generally on the back end, have them chased just in front of the marabou. I'll split that off. And you got two on that side, two on that side. Okay. So that's your back end. Now you're going to take your back end out of your hook. I should back up a second. I always run a piece of super glue over that thread quick. I forgot. A quick little brush of super glue over that. And that way, while you're getting your front hook ready, that super glue is drying quick for you. If you got a little drying pad or anything, you can just set that right on your drying pad. Generally, when I do these, I'll tie a dozen of these flies at a time, if not more. And I'll probably make it a 2-day process. I'll tie the back ends all in one night, and then tie the front ends the next night. So now I'm going to go to my bigger hook, my larger hook, my size 1. Or size 2, whatever you want to use. Size 1 seems to be pretty good for that. That's the Gamakatsu B10S as well, just like the back hook is. So now I'm basically going to do the same thing again. I got to add a couple more features to it now. I'm going to start my thread again. And we're going to run it back to the bend of the hook here. Alright, and so now your question might be, how do I, if you're not used to tying articulated streamers, how do I connect that back into the front end there? There's multiple different things out there, depending on what you're tying with. You can use Rio's bite wire in the lower pound range. I just use Greg Senyo's thin intruder trailer wire. It's been great stuff. It's absolutely strong enough for trout. Used mostly on steelhead flies and stuff like that, for spay guys or two-hand guys, whatever, tying intruders and stuff. But this has become great material to tie streamers with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little piece of intruder wire, probably about 3 inches long, 2-3 inches long. I'm going to run that right up through the eye of the back hook then. Now, if you want to, it's not a necessity, but some guys like to add articulation beads, whether it's glass beads, rattle beads, little plastic beads, whatever. They make those. You can add that to it. For tonight, I'm going to add a little red articulation bead in there. You can add some guys add those smaller glass beads, which are absolutely awesome as well. I'm just going to add one glass bead. You're going to take both the points of the lead wire then. This can be kind of tricky to see, but I'm going to take both those, run it straight up through the center there, thread it right down, and there you're going to have a little loop in between your articulation bead and then where it's going through the eye of your hook. Okay, we'll take that. I'm going to tie the wire in on top of the shank now. And I'm going to butt that articulation bead right up against the back of the hook there. Okay. Going to tie in my articulation wire now up to where I started my thread on the shank of the hook. Right there. Now you can see you got a little bit of wire here still hanging up. What I'm going to do to add a little extra security to that is I'm going to fold that over, bend it down, and I'm just going to tie that the whole way back down to the bend of the hook. If you misjudged on your wire, and you're still left with some when it gets to the bend of your hook, you can just take an old pair of wire cutting scissors, or wire snips or whatever, and clip those ends off. I generally always pre-measure my wire. I like to tie a lot of flies, so I try to get my materials to last me as long as possible. So pre-measured that it stopped already right at the bead. This is a fly I've tied a bunch of times, so I already know how long that wire needs to be every time. So right there's that. Now I'm going to come back to the bend here. I'm going to take some more marabou again. You can tie it on top or below. I like to do side to side, so that way it helps hide the ugliness a little bit of this back portion of the fly. Tie that in right there. It's also going to hide that articulation bead a little bit too. It'll cover up all this area that doesn't look like a fish at all. So I'm going to tie that in on that side. Snip off the junk there. I'm going to take another piece of marabou, and on my near side I'm going to tie that in right there. Might need to shorten that up a little bit just so it covers up that articulation a little bit. There. Okay. And then you're going to have just maybe some junk hanging off the end here with marabou. You can just tie that down. All right, and basically we are now just going to repeat. Just going to repeat with this middle section here what we did on the first hook. Before I do that, I want to add my eyes now, just so that way I have a idea of where I'm going to wrap my middle section, my body section of that UV pearl chenille and the schlappen. So I'm going to come back up here to basically right here, about 3/4 of the way up the shank of the hook. I'm going to take my lead eyes. Same thing, I'm using the double pupil lead eyes that I used like on the Goblin. These ones are chartreuse. They come in about 5 or 6 different colors as well. I'm going to tie that in, secure that. The cool thing is when you fold your wire over up here where you first tied in at, makes like a little thread dam there, a little bump right there, which is absolutely helpful for securing your eyes in with. And the reason you want to tie them 3/4 of the way back is at the very end of this fly, there's a little bit of dubbing involved to create the head of it. So I'm sure everybody has seen dubbed head flies out there before. Super effective for building heads with. And figure eight that a few times, secure that in. And I'm going to reverse right to the back here now. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to take my smaller piece of schlappen that I had earlier, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the first piece, the larger piece. Or I'm sorry, this is my larger piece of schlappen. The smaller piece went on the back end. Going to strip that down quick. And get that down to the end there. Now I'm going to strip down on both sides, left side and right side, for a little tie-in point on the vein. And I'll tie that in first.
Neil says you should take a drink.
Yeah. Best time of the year, summer shandy time. All right. Clip that off. Next, I'm going to grab my another piece of that copper UV Polar Chenille, and I'm going to tie that in together. All right. And now, same thing that we did before. We're going to take our little handy dandy gator clip tool from Loon, and we are going to gather your piece of schlappen along with your piece of UV Polar Chenille, and we are going to marry them together in there and twist them up like a dubbing brush. Like I said, anywhere you can judge yourself, anywhere from 10 to a dozen turns will generally tighten it up enough that it will get it nice and flared out, real buggy looking. Take our brush, our comb, whatever you got available, piece of Velcro, and I'm going to just pick all that out. And now I'm going to start wrapping up to the front. Now this time, like we did with the back end where we wrapped the whole way up to the eye of the hook, we're going to only wrap a little over halfway. And then, because what I do with this one to change it from the original pattern is I add a piece of deer hair, a chunk of deer hair in here, deer body hair, deer belly hair, whatever you want to use. Add that in there, and what that does is that creates a little bulk to the head for your dubbing, allows your dubbing to stand up, and it helps push a little bit more water, which is one thing I like. This pattern, unlike the Goblin, I like to fish this pattern in pretty heavy water. So this is my smaller pattern to use in heavier water, especially when I'm guiding. And this is a pattern you can still, I tie it smaller than the original version, so you can still throw it in a pinch with a 5 weight or a smaller weighted rod and still be effective with it. I got olive deer hair, just a patch of olive deer hair. You can use almost any color deer hair behind there. You can use yellow, black, anything like that. It's going to work. Just take about a finger or a finger width or a pencil width of deer hair, and you're going to cut that off the hide right there. Now you're going to have a bunch of junk on the underside, a bunch of under fur of that. You don't want to pick all that out. You can put this in a hair stacker as well. Straighten those tips up a little bit. Get everything nice and straight. I'm going to try to bounce it softly here so it doesn't mess up the camera. Your tips are all going to come out nice and aligned, nice and even. You're going to see you're going to have a bunch of fuzz off the front tips of that deer hair. So you're going to grab it by the tips there, pull it out. Grab your mess of little stuff that you didn't need under there. Grab those tips a little bit. Clean them up. Now, I'm not going to need that long chunk of deer hair coming off the back of it. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to take my deer hair scissors and I'm going to trim that down just a little bit. Nice and flush. Right there. So that way when I tie it in, where that little section right there is going to kind of flare up and create some bulk right behind the eyes. Tie that in right up top there with your 210. This is where your heavier thread kind of comes into play a little bit too, because it'll allow your deer hair to spin a little bit right there. You'll see it'll make almost like a little crown right behind the eyes right there, which is great. That's perfect. Okay, and now I'm going to come right in front of that. Tie that in right in between the lead eyes and that deer hair and just build up a quick little thread dam in there. And that's going to secure all that deer hair. If you wanted to, you can glue along the way with this fly and put a little piece of super glue in there to help secure that up. That'll definitely work. Some guys will take super glue with a brush on it and they'll brush their thread as they wrap along. That secures that. That's also very effective to do. Next, I am going to take some more rubber legs. Same thing, gold again. And take 2 strands of rubber legs there. And I'm going to horseshoe it around my thread quick. This will create your lateral line if you want to and give more movement. And I'm going to swing that right in behind the eyes there, secure it. And then I'm going to take 2 and 2 off each side. Secure that. Secure those right there. Bunch of wraps. Kind of get them just so that rubber legs can move on you a little bit, so you have to play with them. Get them to secure down, lock down. And there's that. So perfect. I'm going to even up my ends here quick. And I'm going to have them chasing into the back half of the fly then. And just cut those off. Sometimes longer the legs, the better. There you go. And now you're pretty much on the home stretch now. Now we're going to move to our dubbing portion of this fly. I like to use a mix of Fly Fish Foods Junior Blends and Senyo's Laser Dub. Both these dubbings are very, very similar in how they're designed. Cool thing with Fly Fish Foods Junior Blends, they got an adult blend and a junior blend, which are basically just 2 different sizes. The junior blend's a little bit smaller cut, as opposed to where Laser Dub from Greg Senyo is all one size. So for the top portion of it, I like to use that junior blend where it's just a little bit smaller. It won't come back off the top as much. And then the bottom portion, I'll use the Laser Dub from Greg Senyo. On any of your bait fish patterns, generally they have suckers or forage fish or sculpins or anything like that. They generally have a lighter belly, so we're going to use the tan. You can use white, anything for the bottom portion of that. I'm going to take some of that dubbing. I'm going to just chop it up a little bit here in my hands and kind of get it just so it stacks on top of itself a little bit. I'm going to put one first little thin layer of that in behind the eyes. And I'm going to just get it so that way it kind of flares off the side a little bit there. I'm going to fill in these sides right behind the eyes. Sometimes you'll get a little open gap of dubbing in there. It does. I don't think it makes a big difference because once this all gets wet, everything kind of combs back over the eyes and stuff, and it's not the end of the world if you have a little open space in there. So there's that. Generally, I don't put anything off the bottom yet until I get in the front. I don't like to have a ton of dubbing off the bottom just because of it getting wrapped around the eye of the hook when it gets long, this longer dubbing. It can make its way back. You'll have to trim it up sometimes with your scissors so that way it doesn't affect your hook sets at all. So get some of that ready. So now I'm going to go in the front here. You might have some deer hair still that gets trapped up front here. If you want to, you can take your scissors in there and trim it up a little bit. You don't have to because your dubbing will generally kind of hide it back there. So there's that. Now I'm going to go up front here quick, and I'm going to just stack some more dubbing. And this is where I'll tend to use a little bit more of this dubbing because for every bit of dubbing you put in there, you'll lose quite a bit of it as soon as you'll learn that not all of it gets tied down like you think it does. Especially if you're tying quickly, you'll end up brushing it then at the very end, and half of it will end up pulling out in your brush. So I like to dub a little heavy right there. You'll see it will start to take shape a little bit here once you get that front one in there. All right, now I'm going to go to my bottom here, add some dubbing to the bottom. You can, if you don't have a rotary vise, you can take your fly out of your vise if you want to and try to turn it upside down. You can just try to tie with it being in on the bottom here. Once you get that one pinch wrap in there, you're usually free and then to tie down pretty tight, and it'll hold right off the bottom just like that. That actually worked out pretty good to my advantage right there. And now I'm going to add just one more little. Now I'm going to start using less dubbing. I'm going to add just one more tiny little stack right in front there. See how it looks. You got to play with it a little bit here and just see how it turns out. Less is more, they still always say with dubbing. But with this situation, if you put a little extra in, it usually doesn't hurt because you can brush quite a bit of it out sometimes. So one more right there. That kind of turned out pretty good for my likings right there. And I'm going to give 2 or 3 more securing wraps. I'm going to come in with my whip finish now. If you do half hitch or whatever, same thing. Secure that. I'm going to snip it off. Comb some of that back. I'm already pulling out a good bit of it with my fingers a little bit. I'm going to sneak in there with my super glue. I'm going to glue up my thread quick. Get that in there. And then at the end, if you have Velcro or a comb, a dubbing brush, I've got multiple different things I use all the time. I switch through them. They all work. You can go through and just comb that head up just a little bit. Probably could have put a little more dubbing just around the front half of that eye, but it's still going to fish. This dog will hunt still. And that is the Flugen Zombie. My portion of it, the shortstop Flugen Zombie, where I added just a couple additional things. So try them. I'm going to stick around for about 5 more minutes here with comments that I can, or questions I can answer for anybody. If you ever have any questions on these flies and you're in the Boiling Springs area, you can stop in and talk about them with me. But that is about it. So thank you, everyone. And I'm going to stick around here for about 5 more minutes now that I can answer questions and actually stop letting my beer get warm. Those are the 2 patterns I'm going to do for tonight. I didn't want to bore you guys all night long with streamers. Thank you, C West. Thanks, Lee. Can't wait to see you in the shop, buddy. John, thank you, buddy. Amy, you're awesome. What fish does this attract? This is a great pattern for trout and bass. Pre-spawn bass, we're kind of coming into, we actually are in pre-spawn bass season right now, so this is a great pattern to use for pre-spawn bass. Also trout fishing in general during higher water periods. This is a really good pattern to go to if you get caught in some higher water patterns, for sure. Places like Penns Creek or Juniata or something like that, bigger rivers, this is a great trout pattern to use. I've also used this for our local waters, the yellow breeches and stuff like that, Latort. It's just as effective there. Neil Sunday, you saw the Goblin catch a Latort wild on the first cast. Yep, that's what it does. Simple and it works. That's why it's my favorite pattern. Bonnie, thank you. Haven't seen you forever. Ready for the store to open back up and see all of our awesome customers we have. Me and Amy, I think we're ready to strangle each other because we're in a shop with each other every single day for the past 3 months. This is show you guys here. This is another one that I tied. I was actually going to tie this color too. This is a little olive brown.
Put your hand behind it like a backdrop so that like.
Oh yeah. This is another one of mine tied as far as color wise goes. Olive and yellow and copper with that sculpin wool colored dubbing in the front and tan on the bottom. It's good. So that's one there. This would be the original Flugen Zombie, where it's just all marabou and some flashabou and stuff like that. So you can see how long it is. It's definitely a lot longer than the ones I tie. Bonnie, we're ready to hear some fish stories when you get back. All right, guys. Well, if nobody else has any questions, I think we're gonna call it a wrap for the night, and time to go sit on the couch and watch a movie tonight. Enjoy the weekend. Everybody have a good weekend. Stay safe and get out and fish. Thank you, guys.